Approximately 2 years ago, I was heading home from a family gathering late at night. The journey back was about 2 hours. I couldn't stay over because I had work obligations early the next day. The route was mainly through areas surrounded by dense foliage and woods, the kind that often feature in suspense movies. Around 45 minutes into the drive, I suddenly felt overwhelmingly tired. It was that unexpected wave of fatigue that can hit you without warning. Recognizing I wouldn't be able to make it without a break, but unable to find a suitable spot to rest safely, I made a questionable decision. I pulled off the road onto the grass, tucked behind some bushes, aiming to conceal my car from any passing traffic. Though not frequent, vehicles passed by every now and then. I noted it was 11:22 p.m. before drifting off to sleep. I was abruptly woken up by a scratching sound at 11:50 p.m. The noise ceased after a few seconds, and due to my extreme tiredness, I chose not to investigate, opting to sleep instead. The same noise awakened me again at 12:40 a.m., this time more persistently. It unsettled me, especially because it suggested whatever was inspecting the car had returned almost an hour later. Glancing in my rear-view mirror, I caught a brief sight of something retreating into the woods. At that moment, I recalled the urban legend of the hook-wielding attacker notorious for targeting cars, which propelled me into action. No more than 100 yards ahead, as I navigated a bend, I saw a car parked by the side of the road, its driver's side door ajar. Slowing down, I saw no one inside, and then, checking the rear-view mirror again, found nothing. Suddenly, a man sprinted around the curve, shouting frantically for me to exit my vehicle. The situation escalated quickly, and choosing safety, I sped away. I never encountered the man again. The lesson learned? Avoid sleeping by the side of a secluded road. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Due to construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were quiet, which wasn't a problem until I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, possibly in his 40s, a little scruffy, but not without a home. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to startle him, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you." He turned around and gave me this incredibly angry look. I turned down my street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was terrible and he was going to harm me severely. I live right off the corner and didn't want him to figure that out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is, when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my front stoop, staring out at the street as if he knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to my friend's place, but my bike was stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. This isn't related to supernatural occurrences, yet it remains one of the most unsettling and surreal events in my life. One early morning a few years back, I was walking to my bus stop while eating a banana. It was dark, misty, around 5 a.m., and I was pondering over something minor, like whether I should get my daily Starbucks before or after my commute. As I neared the dimly lit corner of my street, a tall individual wearing a black mask emerged from the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely noticed him. His command to "put down your purse," while pointing a gun at my head, made reality sink in. He repeated, "Put down your bags," to which I responded, Okay, I'm placing them down here." He instructed me to walk toward him, into the alley, and get down on the ground, and I complied. "I'm coming, okay." My heart raced, and the smell of banana lingered on my hands. I knew I needed to escape. For some reason, my mouth kept moving. "Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please, just take my stuff." However, he wasn't pleased. "Keep quiet, okay?" He then positioned himself on top of me, gun still aimed at my head. It's relevant to mention that I was dressed for coaching a high school practice, appearing more masculine with baggy pants, a hat, and a jacket. Only my voice betrayed my gender. As the assailant realized I was a woman, He got off of me, stood up, and gestured toward the dark alley. "Come with me." My stomach turned. I was aware of recent sexual assaults in my area, happening even during broad daylight. Upon his demand to follow him down that grim alleyway, my internal monologue fiercely objected. "There's no way you're going down there without resisting." "But he's armed," another part of me argued. "Follow me," his real voice commanded. Yet what I do naturally is converse. "I'm coming, I'm right behind you," I reassured him. Then he made a fatal error. He believed me. I took a couple of small steps backward toward the sidewalk. As he turned his body and his weapon toward the alley, I saw my chance. With a deep breath and my head tucked down in case shots were fired, I began to sprint. A scream, high-pitched and panicked, escaped me before I realized it was mine. After dashing for 6 or 7 blocks, I headed back to my apartment, praying he hadn't followed. The police surveyed the alley an hour later, but the aggressor had vanished. The only remnants of our encounter were my banana peel turning brown in the alley and the adrenaline surge I couldn't shake for days. I'd be dishonest to claim this experience doesn't trouble me still. Yet, I am profoundly grateful that my hauntings are only by the what-ifs and not the what happens. I posted this story on another platform, but it seems appropriate to share it here as well. This story involves not me, but my sister. During her childhood, my sister had an imaginary friend. This friend was an older lady named Lucy, who was kind and played with her until she was about 4 years old, at which point the interactions ceased. Let's fast forward to when my sister was around 10 years old. One day, our mom had to leave in a hurry because she received a call about our grandfather requiring attention at the nursing home, so she left with our dad. At this time, my sister and I shared a bedroom, and she was in the room while I was on the opposite end of the house. Suddenly, the radio in our room turned on by itself, the volume going all the way up before turning all the way down, and then it shut off. This unusual activity repeated itself 3 times. Concerned, I went to our room to check on my sister, half expecting her to be causing the commotion, only to find her looking terrified. Approaching the radio to disconnect it, I discovered it wasn't plugged in, nor did it have any batteries. It was the only radio we had in the house. When I turned to ask my sister about it, she whispered that it was Lucy. She had seen her. In a panic, I called my mom, who became extremely distressed by the news. It turned out that our grandfather had just passed away. Although shaken, I tried to move past the incident. However, during the funeral, a relative approached us with a photo she had found. My sister immediately recognized the person in the photo as Lucy. It was an image of my grandparents on their wedding day. My grandmother had passed away long before I was born, when my mom was just 11. We grew up in the house where my mom was raised, but we never had any pictures of her. My step-grandmother had disposed of them all when she moved in after my grandmother's passing. My mother shared this story with me not long ago, though the events unfolded about a decade in the past. At the time, my cousin was between 17 and 18 years old when she was involved in a tragic car accident and subsequently passed away a few weeks later in the hospital. She shared a special bond with my dad's sister, our aunt, and was often tasked with looking after her children, who were no older than 4 years, quite regularly. Just before my cousin's passing, my aunt's house had been undergoing renovations, a process that continued even after she had passed on. One day, while at work, my aunt received an unexpected phone call from one of the construction workers on site. He reported seeing a teenage girl frequently visiting the house, wandering around with no apparent reason. He mentioned that this had been occurring multiple times over the span of a few weeks. My aunt inquired for a description of the young girl, wondering if perhaps she might recognize her from the neighborhood. The description she received, long brown hair, a red baseball cap, denim dungarees, and a white jacket, matched that of my cousin perfectly, who had passed away just a few weeks earlier. Upon returning home, my aunt showed the construction workers a photograph of my cousin. They unanimously confirmed that she was indeed the girl they had seen at the construction site. This narrative profoundly unsettled me upon hearing it, as our family has traditionally been skeptical about the paranormal and had never before experienced anything of a supernatural nature. It was around this time last year. We had a friend who suddenly became unaccounted for, disappearing for almost a week. Our paths didn't often cross since he resided in a campus dormitory, and I wasn't typically informed about his whereabouts. My awareness only heightened that fateful night when my housemates came across a post on the university's Facebook page. It mentioned the discovery of 2 individuals at a secluded spring situated at the distant edge of our campus, which borders a mountain. The news immediately sent waves of concern through us all, particularly after confirming that our friend had indeed been missing. Anxiety escalated as we awaited confirmation, and when initial identification reports surfaced, our fears were confirmed. Despite a misspelling in his last name, there was no doubt it was him. In a state of urgency, my housemates and I arranged to meet with his dormitory mates, while I reached out to a few of our friends who headed straight to the springs. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, the authorities had already transported the individuals for an autopsy. Powerless, we found ourselves awaiting further updates. Subsequent findings revealed a tragic accident. The pair had gone swimming at the location the previous weekend and unfortunately drowned. Prolonged exposure had led to their bodies becoming exceedingly swollen, and marine life had begun to erode their skin. Initially, the condition of their appearances led to speculation of a fraternity initiation that took a grave turn, due to what seemed like whip marks covering their skin. It was a profoundly tragic end.